defence. Wilco makes a run ahead of it. Bergkamp suddenly changed pace through the centre. It's Bergkamp! That's magnificent! The move, and then this, which left Dabby's ass totally stranded.
Hello, and welcome to our Bergkamp Wonderland and Arsenal podcast. My name is Carl. When we was planning this podcast, we were going to talk about all our new signings. Sadly, that didn't really happen, did it? But I have a wonderful, wonderful panel today. We're going to start with Ginger Josh. How are you?
I'm very happy. I'm here just to annoy people. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to take my own irritation and just send it out to everybody. And I can't wait to hear one of our guests give us the ins and outs of all of the transfer dealings that we did from the journalistic side as well.
I mean, we are blessed today, Josh, because we got podcasting royalty. I mean, not the Prince Andrew kind, but, you know, like the actual allegedly, but we got actual podcasting royalty. I'm going to start off first with, it's Christopher Carpenter. How the devil are you, Chris?
Carl, I'm good. First and foremost, I am no longer a Christopher. I haven't been for about 8 years. So thanks for that. You will address me by my correct name. But Carl, I have a question for you before we sort of, commence this evening. I was browsing through Twitter earlier on and I see that London Tubes are 1.5 million in the hole. You want to explain that suitcase that you were caught on camera with last week, or should we move on?
I can't confirm or deny my townhouse in New York. However, if you'd like to come over, just tweet me and we can get this arranged.
Fabulous.
And
I'll slide into your DMs later on about
that. Obviously. And speaking of a man of the world, we are going to talk about introduce a man who is known throughout journalistic entities far and wide. It's Simon Collins. How are you, Simon?
I'm good. I've just about recovered from the wild scenes of deadline day. But I'm sure we'll get onto that.
I mean, at least you didn't have to have a dildo in your ear, unlike some journalists a few years ago. So,
not through choice, anyway.
You got a camera in my house.
This is going to be really difficult to kind of kick off with. I guess we have to talk about the outs because there was loads of them. Chris, I'll come to you. Transfer deadline day was a bit of a wet fish for us because there was no ins. But would you say you're happy with the outs that happened?
Haven't got much choice, have we? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I suppose there's one big one, isn't there, in terms of the outs? I think we're all upset that Said Kolasinac has finally gone. That's heartbreaking news. But no, in all seriousness, mate, I'm kind of intrigued. I think the problem we've got with this window in terms of the outs is we aren't really going to know the long-term implications of them until probably next summer and beyond, particularly with the Aubameyang one, because that's, I think Simon will probably have the figures, but I read something like 25 million quid or something it'll save us in the long run by him generously ending his contract or Mikel setting fire to it, one of the two. But I think that's probably the big one. We might touch on him in a bit more depth later on. But as for the rest, I think I've been quite quiet on Twitter recently, mainly because I've just been busy with work. But just I've sort of logged in here and there and just kind of caught the temperature of what people feel. And the one I think that most people are a little bit surprised about is Callum Chambers, not because he's a sort of first team regular, but I think the general consensus is he's a bit more popular than Cedric, to keep it mildly understated. And he's probably a player who I think we just assumed would just be around, really. Like, we just couldn't imagine him going anywhere else. I'm pleased for him because I think he's good enough to play at a good level. And I think Villa's probably a club that will offer him some game time. So fair play to him. But I guess the biggest question, and again, this will probably be for the other guys to answer, but the biggest question that I have after looking at these outs is how many more transfer windows, January or summer, how many more are we going to go through where we either lose a marquee player on a free or continue to either pay players off or essentially push them out the door, having given them contracts, within the last 18 months, 2 years, even 3 years, where we've sort of said that they're going to be key members of the squad. That's the slight concern, that we're having to pay people to leave or open the door and gently shovel them out as we go. So maybe that's one for the other guys to answer. But overall, I think the business out was probably about right. It's trimmed the squad. But, we are one injury away from us not getting a call-up at this point.
Do we have enough players to, get rid of on frees or any close that are marquee? I think the next one we see potentially leaving of that kind of heralded big fee coming in is Pepe. But I'm probably going to talk later in the show. I think he is the guy we're going to probably hang a lot of our hope on for the rest of the season. But Carl, I assume you want to talk about the outgoings still.
I was just going to ask Simon about Chambers, sticking with Chambers. When it popped up on Arsenal Twitter feed, I was literally shocked, and I may have asked you in our group, Simon, did you have any clue of this happening? Was there any talk of it happening? Even you said no, it came literally out of the blue.
Yeah, completely shocked me. And I heard my colleague Sam, who writes for the Telegraph, speaking on a podcast, and I think he's the only person who I've heard who had a few days before it happened, heard things that this was possibly going on, but a lot of people within the club were sort of shooting it down and saying no, and then bang it took place. But I think a few people have said that that is the way that Villa operate with a lot of their deals if they can. I think Danny Ings was saying in an interview he couldn't even tell his family members about it, so they try and keep it super, super quiet. So it probably explains why it was like that. But that, for me, I'm in the same boat as Chris. It's the only outgoing I can't really understand. Kolasinac, Mari, it's not really playing. I don't think they're going to have an impact. And if you make the top four, Chambers, for me, particularly with Tomiyasu, doesn't look like he's fit or sound like he's fit. I think Chambers, when he's going to be going for free in the summer anyway, so the savings aren't going to be that much. I know Arsenal have got a bit of a deal like Spurs have with Dele Alli, where I think they can make sort of 2 million if he performs well for Villa. But again, such a small amount. I just didn't really understand why he didn't stay in. And when you've lost Mari, he could have been a fourth emergency centre-back if you needed. So that was the one that confused me. The rest of the outgoings I thought made sense. Even Aubameyang, I think the financial savings make sense. Not replacing him obviously is a big issue, and we'll get on to what we think they should have done with that, who they should have tried to bring in. And maybe Maitland-Niles, could they have done that deal later in the window? I don't know. I think he'd been given assurances that he was going to be able to go in January because in the summer he wanted to go and he never got the game time. But could you have said to him, look, can you do us 2 weeks while we get through this midfield crisis? It's difficult because, I don't know if the Xhaka positive was before he'd flown to Rome, all these sort of stuff. But those are the only ones that I think you can have question marks about. And I think could come back to buy them.
Sorry,
Josh, for
question.
Go on, Chris.
Sorry, Carl. Yeah, just while I was on the subject. So, do you know anything about the loan deals, in particular the ones that to me, it didn't make a lot of sense. So we recalled Aziz and we recalled Nicolas Mola, and there was a third, wasn't there?
John-Jules, yeah.
John-Jules, yeah. And then immediately sent them back out. Was that sort of Arsenal shithousery to say, look, guys, we're trying when we had the whole postponement to almost justify, or was it purely because we looked at all three? I know in Aziz's case, he wasn't getting game time at Portsmouth, but I'm led to believe Mola was getting time in Germany and John-Jules was doing all right. I can't remember the league. Is it League Two club he's on loan at? Was that just a Lincoln? That's the one. Was it a posturing thing, or did they just want to freshen it up?
I think they were generally sorting loans for them, but definitely Aziz was the case. And the issue with Aziz was he actually came back and got COVID. So I don't think he could have. I don't think he would have counted as being available anyway for that Spurs game, which obviously got a lot of attention. But there has been an issue with sort of numbers, full stop, which is why there was a bit of an outcry when players were leaving. They've taken a lot of young players to Dubai. Jack's gone to Dubai. But I think for loans, they are pretty proactive now. In terms of pulling the plug if the player's not getting game time, and B, trying to get a model a bit like, not the same as Chelsea, but other clubs where players go on loan and increase their value. And it's part of the reason why they've sort of scrapped, other than a few of the loans. I think Mavropanos and Guendouzi are the two where basically will be made permanent, but stopped having these obligations because, particularly with Mavropanos, I think it's something like £4 million, and his value is worth more than that. So a lot of these loans, I think they've scrapped doing that because they've realised, like Mari and Maitland-Niles, just send them straight on loan and let the clubs negotiate and try and get a fee for them, because it's not really worked out in the past where you've just given them a set fee, because usually the selling club's getting the better deal. I mean, we saw it with Willock. That was a perfect example where if you'd said for his loan he was worth about 10 million and you sold him for 25. So
yeah. Back to you, Carl. Sorry.
No, sorry. I was going to ask Josh a question. Was there anyone that sort of surprised you that went out and you didn't think that they would leave? I mean, barring Aubameyang aside, or maybe you did expect it.
No, the only one that I expected or didn't expect was Chambers. Mari was a little bit surprising, but then when you drop out of all domestic competitions other than the league, I think the way Arsenal have played some games, there's been chances where we look like we've been knocked out the league as well. But otherwise, I think, everything to me made sense. These players weren't going to get game time. I think I had to look through the numbers, and other than Aubameyang, I think the rest of the players that left had less than 100 minutes on average they played for us in the first half of the season. So, there's the small things about timings. Could we have been smarter with what we did with Maitland-Niles? Well, sounds like maybe we couldn't. There's only so much you can push a guy before he just tells you to fuck off. And I think we're probably at that level with Maitland-Niles. I'm not too worried in terms of cover as well, especially across defence. We've 17 games left. I know there's a convoluted run of events that make it sound all very depressing, that if we end up with a lot of injuries and a COVID outbreak, then we have a potential issue. But one of the loans that I think I was kind of hopeful that did fall apart was the one for Rekic to go out on loan, because I think he's the one that, he's got some international experience now, going out to the AFCON with Tunisia, coming back with that. That's going to be something that I think he should be pushing for the first team. And if we do end up at that problem, then it's an opportunity for him. And I'd much rather be giving the minutes, and I think we all would, to a youth player over someone like Pablo Mari. We'd much prefer to see the youngster come in rather than assign somebody who is going to be in 6 months deadwood. I think we would all be in that way, and we'd probably say, why the hell have we got Willian again when we've got, at the time, Saka coming through, Smith-Rowe coming through, Patino coming through. There's clearly a system, and I trust what Per Mertesacker is doing in the academy. He's bringing the kids through correctly, and as Chris has said with the loan deals, he's clearly looking at these boys' opportunities and saying, if they're not getting the game time, come back and I'm going to send you somewhere where you're going to get the stuff you need. And even looking at what Saliba's doing at the moment as well, is there does seem to at least be logic behind a lot of the loan deals for the players that are under 22. That's where I think I'm not that worried and wasn't hugely surprised. I was so surprised that we were so ruthless in what we did and efficient, but it is another needed window where we've cleared a lot of people out that were on big contracts or just weren't bringing anything to the team. And that's what we need to do. We need to just get more efficient and more ruthless.
I mean, Simon, I don't know if you've got the numbers, but, with all the players that we've sort of loaned out, we've obviously made a lot of savings, and I don't know whether Arsenal are paying some of their wages or part of the wages, but hopefully this goes towards the big summer transfer. Do you know the sort of a figure of how much money we've saved?
Going back a fair old, if you're going back all the way to January this time last year, which is when the sort of clear out began. You're looking at Ozil on 350 grand a week, Kolasinac 90 grand a week, Mustafi 100 grand a week, Socrates 90 grand. Then moving on now to Kolasinac 100 grand a week, Chambers 70 grand a week, Aubameyang 250, 300 grand a week. So you're getting on, towards pushing sort of near £1 million a week once all these players have gone. If you add in the likes of Maitland-Niles and Mary's wages not being paid, so it does create a huge, savings in terms of wages, and that's something that the club have needed to do anyway. I remember ages ago Kroenke speaking about the Champions League wage budget in a Europa League team. So they've needed to come down, but I do think if you're looking at it positively, you need this space in the wage bill to reward the players who you want to reward. And they've got a crop of young players now. Saka, Martinelli. You could probably throw Gabriel in there as well, who this summer you sort of want to be looking to tie down to new contracts. And these are the guys who need to be your top earners at the clubs, not your Aubameyangs, your Lacazettes, your Ozils. It needs to be these guys. So they have set themselves up, I think, for a big summer, but the scrutiny on the summer now is going to be absolutely huge. When you have a dead window like this one was, it does turn all eyes onto it, and they're set up for it. But it's going to be a big task, I think, and it's going to be a lot of pressure from supporters for them to get it right.
I mean, Chris, how difficult do you think it's going to be in the summer? I mean, clearly Arsenal have pinned all their eggs in one basket for the summer. And there's no guarantee we're going to get it right in the summer. But like Simon said, all the supporters are now thinking, okay, we suffered this January transfer window where we didn't go for the players that we need, a midfielder, a striker. And there's going to be a lot of clubs out for a striker in the summer, definitely. So how does the caliber of player we get depend on where we finish in the league this season?
Oh, wow, that's a loaded gun. I think the thing you touched on there about everyone's going to be looking for a striker, that I guess that's the worry, because everybody knows what Arsenal needs right now. We're shopping in a market now where every single club that we go for a forward is going to know that we need probably. I mean, I would argue we need two forwards, especially if if both Kieran and Nketiah go, we could arguably need three, depending on what you're going to do with Martinelli, for example, or if you're going to bring someone through. But I think that's the issue you've got. You're kind of in a market where everyone's going to be going for players. I think some of the targets that we were looking at over this window were, to me, just completely ridiculous. And I don't mean that as I'm not sort of slagging the club off as such, but I don't know, I don't have the inside track as many would, but the Vlahovic thing to me was just a giant waste of time, and I can only assume that his people and the negotiations between Juventus and Fiorentina were kind of chucking Arsenal's name in to get his price up and seal that deal. Because if we were genuinely in for him, and I don't just mean, okay, if we made an inquiry, that's fair enough. You've got to inquire for these big players, I get that. But if we genuinely spent the best part of 2.5 weeks trying to convince a player to join Arsenal, for me, he's not the right player. And that's not a slight on Vlahovic, because he made it clear from day one he wanted to stay in Italy. That's nothing against the player. But we're Arsenal. We shouldn't be convincing players to come to us. You convince a player to join a project, sure. You might have to convince a young player to come aboard, to buy into this sort of the Arteta idea of the young players, and it might take 3 years, etc. But if you're going for a marquee striker, that, let's be honest, you are essentially saying you're handing the keys. The next striker that comes into Arsenal, you are handing the keys of goal scoring to this club, and you're saying to that player that you bring in, you are a man. You're the guy we're going to rely on, and we're going to build the team around you. That's my doorbell. Sorry, I don't think it's for me. So we're building for the future, and teams are going to know that. So the price is going to go up. People were talking about Jonathan David in this transfer window and saying, "Oh, could we go for him?" Yeah, Yeah, absolutely, we could, but you're not going to get him out of Lille for anything short of 50 million quid. As Simon about Sven Botman, for example, at Lille. You know, he's rated as a £25 million centre half. Newcastle made an inquiry, and they were quoted 60. So, you know, that just tells you that any club that's worth its salt, like a Lille or like anyone really who's selling a striker, they're going to up the price. And like you said, Carl, it's a massive summer ahead for us because we've got a lot of work to do. We're still a midfielder short, arguably two. Again, I'll keep my thoughts about certain Mr. Xhaka to myself, but you know, there's room for improvement there. Arguably, we might need another backup fullback now, depending on what happens with like Hector, for example. So there's a lot of work to do, and I don't think clubs are going to give us anyone cheap. So lots of work to do, and we need a clear strategy because we can't just go into August going, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think it looks like from the perspective of where we're left is there's 4 big players we need to bring in the summer, which is similar to what we saw last summer, where we basically had to bring in an entire new spine of the team. Well, we didn't know we needed to, but once we saw the players come in, it was wholly apparent that a new spine was what was required. Carl, I'm thinking that we, you know, as Chris has mentioned, there's 2 strikers probably there, and I think we're looking the same for midfield. We've done a bit of business a little bit early. I don't know. I know from the goalkeeper we signed, he's probably just going to come straight in to replace Leno, who goes out. But Si, do you know if there's anything on Trusty? Are we seeing him as an actual, you know, kind of Pablo Mari replacement, you know, 3rd or 4th choice centre back, or?
I don't think so. I think he is possibly long term, but I think club are quite clear in the statement they put out that he is going to go back on loan, obviously till the summer, and then next season they're going to try and find him a European club to get some experience as well. So maybe after that loan he comes in. I'm intrigued to see what happens, not just with him, but with that sort of partnership that KSC have there. We've never really seen them do that before, where they've moved players between clubs a bit like City do in the City group. So whether we're going to see a bit more of a link between the clubs and maybe some young players from MLS come over, vice versa, I don't know. But I think in the short term, he's not someone who's going to be pushing the first team. And I noticed the club didn't tweet it out. I don't know whether that was because they were aware it was deadline day. There were 3 hours to go, and announcing you're signing a young centre back probably isn't the best thing to do on Arsenal Twitter. So maybe that was why. But I don't think he's one for the right now.
I mean, speaking about the players that we got on loan, so I'm going to ask you and Josh and Chris this question. Of all the players we have on loan, how many do you think will be able to come back in and come into the first team? I mean, it's a bit of a loaded question because we know the problems with
that's a long list.
I know we have so many players on loan, and you know, I think we can all know that Guendouzi is not going to come back. Lucas Torreira is definitely probably not going to come back. Probably not even Hector Bellerin is going to be able to come back in the squad. But of the list that's on the screen, that obviously people listening can't see, but I'll go for Chris and Josh. How many of those do you think will be able to come back in, or even will come back into Arteta's plans next season?
Josh, you take this first and I'll come in after you. If you
like. I would say basically anybody that wasn't loaned out that we would call in the under-23s. The only one that I would say is coming back is Saliba. Everyone else has either got deals to stay at their current incumbent club, or there just isn't really a future for them. I can't see us bringing Maitland-Niles back and him being reintegrated into this side. It's clear his head hasn't been at Arsenal for a while, and Arteta's clearly on the fence about him. He's kind of his ability to play in multiple positions has kind of held him back and kind of kept him on the bench because he can play in those multiple positions. But Chris, I think, yeah, other than I probably think Balogun goes back out on loan. I don't necessarily consider him for first team. Is there anyone other than Saliba that you think comes back?
I think Balogun does come back. You know, I think
he's the only striker left.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think we all agree that Nketiah will go one way or the other, whether it's on a free or, well, it's only on a free now, isn't it? Unless they persuade him to sign a contract between now and the end of the season, and then get a fee for him, which has happened before. But I think we agree he goes. I do. It does sort of make me chuckle slightly, and Simon might know a bit more than I do, but it does make me chuckle a little bit that everyone's just assumed that Lacazette's gone on a free. And don't get me wrong, I think that's very much the angle we're going at here. But it wouldn't surprise me if there was a 6-month or year extension chucked on it, you know, in the interim period. And I know it would make a lot of people unhappy and etc. and so on. From our perspective, or from his perspective, the difference in how he's conducting himself as opposed to some other forwards, in terms of his attitude and his work rate. You look at the sort of the pictures of Dubai, and that he's very front and center. He's still very well liked. He's still putting everything into the club that he has. And I know he's missed a few chances, and I know a lot of people got on his back over the Burnley game, but there's a lot on his shoulders now, not just as a striker, but as a guy who's going to carry that forward line, whether it be as the focal point or whether it be as the link striker between now and the end of the season. And for me, if he wants to go on a free at the end of the season, and I know that he's definitely attracting the interest of his former club at Lyon, as well as a couple of other French sides in the summer. If he wants to go, then absolutely fair enough. And that's, you know, no issues there whatsoever. But if you are going to let a player of him go, you can't just go full Arteta project in terms of, you know, no experience at all. You are going to need some form of experience. So I wouldn't be surprised if we brought back Balogun as the young sort of prodigy striker, then bring in the main guy, whomever that may be. But that main guy might not necessarily be a quote unquote youngster. Like I said earlier, I feel like we're going to bring in a sort of, not a finished article, but somebody who might be 25, 26, who's got, you know, his good years ahead of him, but isn't necessarily old, but also isn't necessarily young, has a little bit of experience under his belt, which, for the record, Vlahovic wouldn't have been, because he's only really had, 2 seasons at the top level, or 2 very good seasons at the top level anyway. So I wouldn't be surprised if we brought Balogun back. Saliba is the big one, and obviously there's ongoing questions. I mean, again, so you might know more from an Arsenal perspective than I do from a French perspective. Saliba is playing a very, very clever game, I think, because every interview he does in France, all he talks about is his love for the current Marseille setup, his desire to improve. You know, he never fails to mention that he has a contract with Arsenal. You know, he's being very, very clever. He's keeping his stock high, and from his point of view, and again, it's not it's not a sort of an anti-Arteta thing here, but the way he was misled, I think it's fair to say, over his future. All he's done is gone away. He's got the move that he wanted, i.e. he wanted to go back to France, and fair play to him. He stuck his neck out and said, no, I want the move here. I don't want to play in the Premier League. And that's fair enough for me. And he's played very well. And I think my concern really with the Saliba deal is I think we'll quite happily take him back. I'm not 100% sure that he's quite as ready to come back. And I think let's be real, Marseille can't afford him. And if they could, they would have tried to buy him in January, because they have a transfer ban in May coming up. The suggestion is through CAS that will get overturned. So the likelihood of Marseille it's like the Chelsea ban. You know, there'll be some fuckery and something will happen. They'll probably get away with it. But even without a transfer ban, Marseille would have to stump up an awful lot of money, I think, for him. And they haven't got it. They're trying to move players on. So, and the only other the clubs that could afford him are clubs in leagues he hasn't tested himself in, i.e. probably Italy and Spain. So I think we'd quite happily have him back. The only other thing I'd say on Saliba coming back is he is not going to come back to quote unquote fight for his place. He is a player now who is going to expect to play, and his performances, for anyone who's seen him for Marseille, he more than warrants that. And some people will be in my mentions now going, oh, did you see him make a mistake last night? Yeah, I did, because he's learning and because he's a young centre half. and he takes chances and he takes risks. But 9 times out of 10 this season, he's been absolutely brilliant. So he's not going to come in and be, Ben White's fashion sort of guider around the shops of London, or come in to be backup for Gabriel. He's going to come in and he's going to want to play. And I know Josh and I had a conversation recently about the idea of him playing as a right back or a right-sided centre back who drifts to the right. Yeah, you could see him doing that, but you're not going to drop Tomiyasu. So it's one of those. I think Arsenal's plans are bring him back. My slight worry is we might be bringing him back to sell him, which I think would be a real waste of what he's going to be. I still think he's going to be one of the best young defenders in Europe.
I mean, speaking of all the players that we have out on loan, if we do manage to sell some of them, we will make a little bit of money. I know I saw a tweet that I think Josh, you might put in our group about all the players that we've had and that we've given away for free, essentially. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make for pretty reading, but obviously, as people do, they sensationalize the bad news. But we have lost a lot of players for free, haven't we, Josh?
Yeah, there's a lot from previous regimes that have come in, not necessarily the Brazilian that is in charge at the moment of bringing in players. There's a lot from, the Maitland-Niles, the Rowe, even some Wenger era players in that list as well. I think it is always interesting when you put that kind of list together. Thinking off the top of my head, you had, Nketiah, David Luiz, who I think David Luiz, we let him go at the end of his contract. I think that's slightly different compared to other players that we've let go on free, where we've had to terminate their contracts. Talk about Aubameyang, Mesut Ozil. I think it's one that's always going to be sensationalized, especially when you don't mention the fact that during the same period of letting some of these players go, we sold Alex Iwobi, we sold Willock, we sold Emile Martinez. And I think there's some, if you'd said we'd sold Emile Martinez without the injury to Leno and we'd let him go for a free, I think a lot of people wouldn't have batted an eyelid if we then got, £20 million for Mesut Ozil when we got rid of him. It's all about just, I think, generally a bit of perspective, and see that a lot of the players we got rid of, there was really no market for them. They didn't really pull up trees during their Arsenal career, certainly towards the last 9 to 12 months of that career. I think we can say Aubameyang is probably the only one from there who was still firing on all cylinders just to about a year ago today. But since signing that mega contract, he did fall off a cliff in terms of his performances, and his attitude changed as well. It's very interesting when you scroll back to see exactly what happened at Dortmund. It's exactly the same. As soon as he got the kind of, not necessarily the captaincy, but was given the big contracts and given all of the freedom, that he just then took the piss, really. Danny's just brought up the exits on there. So, it's Aubameyang, Kolasinac, Ozil, Willian, Chambers, David Luiz, Socrates, Mustafi, and Mkhitaryan. Spent circa 200 million on them, got nothing back in return. I mean,
they're not really players with other than Chambers. They're not really players with sort of resale value, which I think is part of the issue in the sort of spend there. You're buying players that are, you're not going to, when you buy Luiz at like 32, you're not going to make any money on him.
No.
And the same as so I think the model of spending is better now. A, from buying players to let them build in the team, and B, buying players who will at least retain their value. But looking at that loan list, I think Lucas Torreira, I think you'd probably get a good fee for now. I think he's been pretty good in Italy from everything I've read. Maitland-Niles, if he has a good 6 months, I think you'll probably get quite a good fee. Balogun, I think I agree with Chris. I think you have to bring him in and play because he's probably going to be the only striker there. I think if Lacazette would be willing to stay for another year and just give Arsenal a bit of continuity with their strikers, I'm pretty sure the club would be happy with that. I get the feeling I don't think he would be happy with that, and Instead, it would probably, it's been talk. I think Olas today said that Lyon want to re-sign him, bring him back to the club. That would make a lot of sense. So the striking situation is going to be really interesting. Saliba as well. For me, the Saliba situation is whether you view it with your glass half full or your glass half empty. It's obviously not been handled very well so far, and he's been at the club for 3 years, cost 28 million, not actually played. So I mean, in basic terms, you need to either sell or renew his contract this summer. Really, you can't go into his final year. I find a loan to Marseille an interesting one, because it was reported at the time that Newcastle were trying to sign him, and in the end, Arsenal gave him the decision to go to Marseille. And again, you either look at that positively and say, "Oh, they're trying to make Saliba happy," they want to, appease him, keep him in a good mood, or you look at it as them going, "Oh, we don't really mind where he goes on loan, just let him go to Marseille, because if you want him to develop in the Premier League, you should have him at Newcastle." There's also the argument where you say, Arteta doesn't like him, he's kept him out of the way, but you could have put the argument forward, if you're being positive, that there's been a lot of disruption in the dressing room. The defence has come in for a lot of criticism until recently. Would it have been wise for all that pressure to be on Saliba and, coming in and trying to be the new sort of Bobby Moore in the back line when there was all this upheaval? Maybe it was best to just keep him to the side and let him develop elsewhere and bring him in when he's actually ready. So it's really interesting. That's the one I'm going to be very intrigued to see what happens with, and the striking situation, because we can talk about it. But for me, getting a number one striker in January was always going to be difficult. But could you have got your number two? And for me, that would have been a player. I think I spoke to Chris about it in one of our WhatsApp groups. Hugo Ekitike was probably my pick, who was linked with Newcastle. I think they had a bid accepted and he turned them down. Young player. I think there's about 20 million was being offered. He could probably play out wide through the middle. And that's what I'd have for my sort of number two striker, is someone who can play a bit like Liverpool with Jota, where you can play them with your number one or you can play them on the side. Whether they're going to do that or not, I'm not sure. And just chatting to some other people today, just, nothing in the know or I to care or anything, but we were sort of saying maybe someone like Dembele at Lyon, who's got, I think, a year left on his summer, an ideal sort of number two. Intrigued to see what Chris thinks about that. But those were sort of the players I was wondering. And the Saliba one, I think, is just going to be so interesting, because, like Chris says, how do you tell him, after he's been the man for Marseille for 38 league games, you're the number three here? I'm not sure how he's going to take that.
I agree with you, Simon. And I want to ask you a question, Carl, actually, if that's right, because we haven't really touched on the big box marked Aubameyang, so I feel like we should just kind of touch on that while we have it on our lips. When we signed him all those months ago, whenever it was, that sort of him and Lacazette came in the same window, didn't they? And I remember talking to Drew about him, friend of the pod, and both Drew and I we both had exactly the same viewpoint. Drew with his experience of when he was at Dortmund, me with my experience when he was at St Etienne, and we both said, if this works, it'll be great and it'll be a real fan favourite and it'll be fantastic. If this doesn't work, it'll end in tears. And it's quite weird that we've kind of both been right in two different ways in the same contract, because there were, I think it's fair to say that whatever you think of Aubameyang, and sure, he has his pluses and his minuses in varieties of different ways, he has done some fantastic things for us, and he carried this team for a good 7 to 8 months. I think it's fair to say we wouldn't have won that FA Cup without him, and he managed to drop it, bless him. So that has to be taken into consideration. You can't look past the fact that when he signed that contract, his form went off a cliff. Like you just can't overlook it. Whether you think there's a motivation issue there or not, it's a fact. Like his form did go, and I know he had malaria and COVID and etc. And I would slightly question with the COVID situation his off the field behaviour and how he got or put himself in those positions, shall we say? But malaria, that's just unfortunate. And he never really found his form again. But when he left, it was very clear, and I don't know if it's actually come out since. I've not really been around on social media for a while, but there has to have been something pretty severe for Arteta to finally cut all ties, because he built this team around him and he defended him so many times. And okay, he dropped him for that North London derby, but he was his cornerstone. He was his captain. Arteta made him captain, let's not forget. He was his man. So it must have been a bit more than just a few latenesses. There must have been something a bit deeper. What question I'd ask you, Carl, is like, how do you look back at him and think this guy's going to be remembered for years to come? You know, maybe not in an Henry or a Wright fashion, but you know, in a heralded figure that we're going to remember for years, or is he just going to go down as, oh, it was great for 18 months and then it's all kind of ended in a bit of a whimper, I guess? Is that how you would feel about it?
It's a bit like the Alexis Sanchez situation, isn't it? He could have been great. And there's a question in my head that I'm going to say because I want to ask Simon a question. But for me, you're right, Chris. There was a period of time where he literally carried us. He was the only person scoring in our team. It was literally almost back to the old Henry days, like get the ball to Aubameyang and he will do something. I worry about the team now, but just sticking on Aubameyang. You're right. Arteta made him captain, and for me, maybe the old school captains of, you know, the Tony Adams, the John Terrys, those sort of eras have gone. Captains may be just a person who the referee talks to nowadays. You don't get the actual leader. But if you're a leader, if you're the captain, you should be a leader. Lead by example. Arsenal have a lot of young players, so I think about if I was a captain, I would be the first person in that dressing room, so that when the young players come in, they see me in that dressing room already changed, ready to go out on the training pitch. I get the impression, and maybe I'm surmising, this is a question I want to ask Simon, that his attitude was all wrong. I mean, Aubameyang was what, 32? He doesn't act 32. And maybe that's money. I mean, I'm not saying like he shouldn't have a good time. I'm not saying he shouldn't go out and enjoy himself. I'm not. But you never see him being serious. Like things like if you're a captain, whenever we lose, he never done interviews. Like you'd never see him. Only if we won, then you'll see him smiling in front of the camera. The times when we lost silly games, and then he's throwing people like Saka in front of the camera, which for me, that's wrong. There was an attitude problem there. And again, I look back, not that long ago, but to when I was like 31, 32, if I had the same amount of money that he had and he could buy Lamborghinis and do all things like that, would I act the same way? And I think, I don't know. Problem is, it's all about the people you have around you. His brother was not a good influence. No matter where Aubameyang went, his brother was there. Aubameyang went to the African Cup of Nations and Aubameyang's brother was on the plane with him. It's almost like, you know, it's like an yes men around. Yeah, like you had yes men around you. Like, you know, he could do no wrong. Should I buy this? Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Should I go here? That's a great idea. Should I do this? Yeah, that's brilliant. There's no one like reining him in. And I think that was the issue. So when with the North London derby game, when he was stuck in traffic, you know, he's lived in London long enough to know that London traffic is absolutely horrendous. And I'm assuming, you know, if you're playing a home game, you should be at the grounds 2 hours before the game, maybe, like, or something along them lines. I mean, and I'm saying this because we don't know what happened. His wife could have felt ill, or his kids could have not felt well, and he could have had an emergency at home. We're only going on, I guess, the limited information that we know. But for him, in a North London derby, probably one of the most, if not the most important game of the season, you're playing your rivals at home. I would think Aubameyang would be at that ground maybe 3 hours early, you know, gearing up the players, saying, look, guys, we've got to win today. We've got to win today. But he's not. He's stuck in traffic. I do think Arteta's management of the situation was a bit weird, because you're saying to someone, you're late, I'm not going to play you, but I'm going to put you on the bench, which makes no sense, because if Lacazette had got injured in the first minute, you're going to put Aubameyang on the pitch. So that was a little bit maybe inexperience from Arteta. Who knows?
He should have got the tube, is what you're saying, Carl. If Oba just got the tube, if he just got the tube, he'd have been on time. He'd have made it fine.
The Northern line was running good because he's in Hampstead, doesn't he? And trust me, it was running good that day. But it's little things like that. Like, you're meant to be a leader. Like, you should lead by example. And I don't think he does that. And I think Arteta maybe just had one too many times of having to deal with him, and it just pissed him off. This is the question I want to ask you, Simon. Was there any rumblings of sort of how bad his attitude was? Or is it literally the Arteta? Because I know Arteta plays a straight back and doesn't really leak that much information out.
No, I think just firstly on the North London derby, I think, I'm not 100% on this, but I think for that game, because of COVID, I don't think you could change who was in the match day squad necessarily. So I think he had to be on the bench. I think was the case, but it could have also, it might have been that, you know, first discrepancy, you're on the bench, next time out of the squad. But no, from my understanding of it and what others have reported is that it was more of an accumulation of breaches, and it was quite telling that the club put in their statement, you know, the latest disciplinary breach, lateness being one. You know, I think there was an incident where he was missed a COVID test for a Europa League game or was late for it. And I think the thing with Aubameyang is that he was never, you know, he was never supposed to really be captain. If you remember, the squad had the vote under Emery, and Xhaka was the one who got it, and Aubameyang was one of the vice captains. But when Xhaka was stripped of it, Aubameyang just became captain because he was the next in line for it. And I don't think it's a role that's really ever suited him. I think he is good from his talismanic qualities and the fact that he is, you know, the best, or certainly when he was in 2020, he was the best player in the team, and he led them from that way, you know, scoring big goals, cup finals, semi-finals. But in terms of an actual leader, I don't think he is really naturally that, and it never really came naturally to him. And it's probably not something he necessarily, you know, really wanted to be in that side. And you know, the lateness thing has been documented before. Obviously, you know, Drew and Chris were talking about it at Dortmund. You know, Tuchel was saying when he was, you know, they would tell, sometimes he was sort of tongue in cheek a bit, but saying, you know, we would tell Aubameyang the meeting was starting 10 minutes earlier, and he would then arrive on time and this sort of thing. So that there was nothing new with that. And I think for Arteta, it just got to the point where, you know, enough was enough, and he had to pull the plug on it. Which is saying something, because their relationship was a really, really good relationship, very close. You know, Arteta was round at Aubameyang's house when they were signing all the contracts together. When he signed that big new deal, Arteta was the one pushing for that, personally persuading Aubameyang. We saw all the stuff after the cup final, you know, those posts of my manager, and Aubameyang, as you can probably tell from some of his late night Instagram lives and things, runs all his own social medias. He's not one of those players who outsource it. That's him posting those things. So they were really, really close. And I think it just shows probably to the rest of the squad, but also to the fans, that as much as Arteta, you know, likes players and is close to them, he is ruthless, and he will, you know, he will stick to his guns when it comes to his discipline and the way he wants to, you know, set the culture. He will die by that sword. And there will be some people who say, you know, it's going to cost him. He should have kept Aubameyang 6 months, might have got into the top four. But I bet you if you asked Arteta whether he would have wanted to row back on his principles and what he believes in, or keep Aubameyang in the squad, he would have 100% stuck by his principles, because that's the way he is. So
I think it was really sorry, Josh. Yeah, I just really quickly, because I know you wanted to speak about it as well. Just really quickly on Aubameyang as well. Just touching on what Simon said there. Two really quick things, actually. The captain thing. We're not all saying you need to have somebody who's going to be a shouter and a raver and all that. But as a manager at any club at any level, you'll know, Josh, Si, you'll know. I'm sure you would have experienced this with your job as well, Carl. But even if you just kick about with your mates Sunday league, somebody being late all the time is infuriating. It's so annoying. It just delays everything. It holds everybody up. And even if you are like Josh or Simon and I've played Sunday League, if you're the guy who's always having to stick the nets up because this superstar, you know, your best player is pissed up the night before and arrives at 5 minutes before kickoff, it does grate you. So as a manager, that must be really annoying. And the other thing as well on Aubameyang is that if you look at what we've all touched on tonight, the future is these young players. That's what Arteta, that is. here we go. The process. That is what Arteta is building. He wants young players, rightly or wrongly. He wants to build around the Sakas, the Martinellis, the Smith Rowes. You have to draw a line at some point, because otherwise, he's already touched on Smith Rowes off the pitch stuff, hasn't he, about his diet and all that. You can't keep bending the rules for players. And this is why I think Xhaka should have been gone. But again, I'll leave that one aside. You have to at some point say enough's enough. And if you're going to reward the younger players, you almost make a statement by saying, do you know what? I'm going to reward you guys with Aubameyang's wage, because you're the guys, you're the future. And I think it's quite telling that, and I had a quick glance through Aubameyang's mentions last night. A lot of the players, saying, all the best and wishing him well and all that, which is great. But there hasn't been a huge amount coming out of the camp about him being missed. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not expecting people to come out and say, oh, God, Saka all in tears on Instagram, I can't believe you've gone. But there hasn't been a huge amount, and even from, I noticed Lacazette hadn't sort of commented on his post, and we know how close they are. And I thought that was just quite telling. So what's your thoughts, Josh?
Yeah, I was going to say, as the general KSE stan or fanboy in my Rams hoodie today, just to wind everybody up. But no, it's a big thing from KSE as well, and what they do with all of their, I'm going to say franchise because it's franchise. A lot of their clubs are franchises, not necessarily Arsenal, but it's the best way to describe the collective, is the importance of the harmony within the dressing room. Now, we know that Josh Kroenke has never been a top-level sportsman, but, played through basketball, played football, understands the dressing room. It's a big thing about that LA Rams dressing room is making sure the harmony was right. So clearing out all the people that weren't necessarily bringing the goods, as Carl's got in his screen name today, it's all about vibes. It's all about having that harmony in the dressing room. And you can see just last January when we got rid of, as quoted by Danny or dubbed by Danny, the Bundesliga bastards. Look how free that squad looked in January when we cleared out all the negativity from that dressing room. Although we may say we're missing a top quality player, look how the rest of that team stepped up and looked like they started to enjoy their football goodbye to my mentions, when Mesut Ozil left. Yeah, he was a top quality player for us and could have offered us things on the pitch, but look how Smith Rowe stepped up. Look how Saka stepped up. They've all pulled together. Even Pepe, because again, it's going to be an argument I'm going to use. He scored 7 goals after February, after Ozil left, and he had that option coming into the team. That's the kind of numbers we would have wanted from a striker that joins in January, is 7 goals in 17 games. And that's what we saw from Nicolas Pepe last season. So I think that's one thing that when the Amazon documentary comes out, and I think every time it will go to a talking headshot and there'll be a member of KSE there, they will be talking about harmony in the dressing room and they will hammer it home. And I imagine that Arteta will be saying the same thing as well.
I mean, I agree. I think, like everyone in their workplace, a happy workplace is a more productive workplace. If you went to work every day and you thought to yourself, oh God, I've got to go into work today and I hate my manager and I hate my work colleagues, you're not going to give your 100%. You're not going to give your full output, whether you're playing football for 90 minutes or whether you're working a 9 to 5. There is no difference, I guess, in that. I don't want to even use this because I hate it, but it is a very long process, and Arteta maybe now has got all the players out that he wants, and now he can say, right, I can start building, I can start doing the things that I want. Whether that's achievable with this squad, who knows? I mean, Simon, there was a report that Arteta flew to America to meet with the Kroenkes. If that's true, one, that's why did he go? Was it just a hello meeting, or was it a meeting to say, look, we need some money to buy players?
He went to the hockey, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he just really wanted to go see a game of hockey. No, the word, the understanding that the sort of club was saying was that it had been pre-planned, which makes sense, to be fair, because it's the first sort of break in the calendar they've had for quite a while, actually, and he hasn't really seen Stan in person possibly since probably at some points during COVID, but certainly not as often as they would. Josh, to be fair, I think everyone's noticed, is much more involved in the running of Arsenal, much more present. But certainly, so in terms of seeing Stan, I think Arteta hadn't seen that, so it was an opportunity to see him, and going to be racking up the air miles, seeing as he flew there and then to Dubai, and then there's obviously going to be back to London. But I imagine there would have been a number of things spoken about. Not least, you would have thought the Aubameyang situation, given wasn't too long ago, 16 months ago, that Stan sanctioned a pretty big contract for him. Possibly also the transfer spend and possibly Arteta's contract as well, because those are things that are going to need sorting. And we're all talking about it being a huge summer and things to get done, but it's also going to be Arteta with 1 year left on his contract. And if you're Stan, are you going to say, here's another 120 million quid if you're not convinced he's the right person? Which, to be fair, I think they are very convinced that Arteta is the right person. I think getting rid of Aubameyang is about as clear a signal as you can give that this is a long-term project under Arteta, because you could have loaned Aubameyang for 6 months and then, thought, well, we might, Arteta might be gone in the summer and then Aubameyang can come back from his loan. The new manager might want him, but you've cleared him out the door completely gone from the situation, which means he's not going to be there in the summer if you did get a new manager. And also, he's not there to make an assault for the Champions League this season, which makes you think, no, we're building something longer here. So they really are thinking long-term with Arteta, in my opinion. And everything we're seeing there in terms of changing the culture dates back towards those last days of Wenger, where players were indulged too much, the discipline slipped. And what I think Josh is right there in terms of, having a harmonious group. It is it's a very small squad now. So it's going to be a very tight-knit group. And they basically got, I think it's 17 games, tight, small squad. And perhaps this was Arteta's thinking, look, we've got a really tight run here. We've got 1 game a week. Let's just get the real small group, get everyone on the same page. No one there who's not going to be playing. Let's just go for it and have a push at it.
I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I think it is a very small squad, but I think 1 game a week, hopefully we can stay injury-free. And if you got this squad and it's almost like the rotation won't be that much. I mean, you think about the striker situation, it is either going to be Nketiah or it's going to be Lacazette. Josh put something in our group the other day which made me think, wouldn't it be surprised if you see Pepe playing up front? I mean, Chris, you obviously saw Pepe play up front when he was in France. I mean, we say this, but we've never seen him play up front under Arteta in the whole time he's been there. But do you think he could do a job, Chris?
I do. I don't think Mikel does. That's the problem. The issue you've got with Pepe is he's a unique talent, and he's an inconsistent flamboyant genius at times. I think that's how I would go with him. He doesn't. The one thing that Pepe gives you is unpredictability and chaos. 2 things that I cannot think of 2 words that Mikel Arteta would like less than inconsistency and chaos, alongside Matteo and Guendouzi. But I just think he represents everything that Mikel isn't keen on, and this is not, and that can change. I think the one thing you have to give, even I will say, you have to give Arteta credit for is, whilst I do think he's a very clever speaker and he is a little bit of a politician in some of the answers he gives, I think that's a front to the camera. I think behind the scenes, away from Amazon, I should stress, I do think that he does self-reflect quite well, and I do think that he takes time out to look at himself as a manager. I really, really wish he wasn't friends with Pep Guardiola, because I just wish he would break away from that sort of micromanagement element of it. But I do think he is quite self-reflective, and I do think he's a manager who wants to improve. And let's be fair, you look at managers who've come and gone and had their big shot at a big club and it's not worked out. This is his big job. This is his big opportunity. If he fails here, he's going to struggle to get any sort of size to a club of Arsenal, in the future. So he's got to get this right. And I think to his credit, he does seem to learn from some mistakes. And I think in terms of players, he's still got a bit to go. He's still got a bit of self reflection to work on in how he manages individual talents and whatnot. But I do think Pepe can offer us something. The other slight issue I've got maybe is Mikel is very loyal to players that he brought in or players that he has gone for, not necessarily players that were there before him. It's not to say he won't give opportunities to players, he will, but he's definitely more loyal to those players that he brought in himself. And I just think with Pepe, there is some sort of, some suggestion that his off the pitch life isn't the best. I think you could level that on most modern day footballers, if I'm honest. But I just think that if you're looking for a player, whether it be to come off the bench or to start a game and have a bit of chaos, he's there. I think if I had the choice, though, I would be more inclined to move Martinelli through the middle and then bring Pepe back into the side as the player that he is, the wide forward, and give him the luxury of having a Smith Rowe or a Saka on the opposite side and just saying to those two, or Odegaard, whoever it be, just saying, right, you guys, just rotate. You three just rotate. We'll play Martinelli as the focal point, as the 9, because what does Martinelli give you that no other player, I think, in that Arsenal forward line, including Smith Rowe and Saka, and I love them both dearly, Martinelli gives you balls to the wall work rate. Saka fades out of games. He just does. Like, people don't like to hear that, but he does fade out of games sometimes. Not saying he doesn't work hard, he does, but he fades out of games. And Smith Rowe at the moment, fitness-wise, he's not quite there, and I think he fades out of games as well, particularly later on in game. Martinelli will run and run and run, and he's like that puppy with a dog. Puppy with a dog? No, puppy with a bone or a ball. He'll just keep running and running and running, and he'll close down goalkeepers. There was that sly little foul on, who was it, the last game where he shoved somebody over? Was it the Liverpool keeper? Like an old-fashioned 70s challenge. I love that about him. He doesn't let anyone sleep. Pepe isn't going to give you that. So if you want your centre-forward to work hard, he just isn't your man, is he? Let's be honest. But I'd love to see it, because just look at the Ivory Coast games. When you've got a coach who has faith in him, who puts him on the pitch and just says, go and do your thing. The biggest thing I noticed about the Pepe with Ivory Coast is the smile was back. He looks miserable at Arsenal. He really does. And I just hope that he gets an opportunity. And if it doesn't work out, fine. As I say, as much as I admire him and I like him as a player, and I'm frustrated that we've never seen the Lille Pepe because he's never had the opportunity to show what he did there in the right role at Arsenal. If it doesn't work out, fine. You cut your losses. You sell him in the summer, probably for about 25 million, because that's all you get, and you move on. But give him the opportunity. Give him the chance to fail or the chance to succeed, and then you weigh it up after that.
Yeah, I think that's what happened in the back end of last season with Pepe's turn in form. It was that before, I think in total, he only had 10 goals in the league, from the first half of the season, and then just tore it up in that second half. And the more I've reflected on the statement, does Pepe go striker, the more I kind of thought, actually, as Chris has just mentioned about Saka and Smith Rowe, not necessarily having the engine that, and add another one in, Martin Odegaard, he can run for days. He's been such an incredible athlete. You could tell immediately when he'd had COVID, when he'd come back, because he just clearly was not at the same level that he was before. What I love about what Pepe can do, rather than what he can't do, and the frustrations that Nicolas Pepe has, is he's one of those players from the 3 that we've got that would play behind the striker that enjoys taking a shot from long range. When everybody is back up against the wall, I've had the misfortune of watching Ziyech in a couple of back-to-back games, one down at the Amex and the other, I can't remember where the other game was, where he scored in back-to-back games. It was basically defence sitting really deep, and the only time that he got that goal was because he was the only player that wanted to take an opportunity from outside the box, and they both resulted in goals. Great technique, and I was like, that's what Pepe does for Arsenal, or can do for Arsenal. There's no one else in the squad that really does that at the moment. Saka still trying to find what he does as a winger, an inverted winger. You don't really see him taking pot shots from outside, the 18-yard box. He's more looking for the creative aspect of it. Again, Smith Rowe, he's more of, almost like getting in the way of Eddie Nketiah as he charges in to kind of tap in at the back post. And we've seen Odegaard do it, but it's not necessarily in Odegaard's game. That's what I want to see from Pepe. If he's coming in, it's that because we're just stuck and the manager just goes to him. And if you saw the goals that he scored at AFCON as well, he's lining up where he's taking his shot from outside the box. He may get into the box when he then had his shot, but he's already made his mind up at that point. It's a deep line because they know I'm quick. I've got plenty of space to pick my opportunity and just bend it into the top corner. And that's where I think there's that opportunity. And whilst we don't like to see Saka coming off the pitch because, one of our own, there is that opportunity for Pepe to come in. And I think we can see that with all the rotation that, I know we're talking about it's going to be 17 games until the rest of the season. I expect some doubled up game weeks because of other teams' commitments that whilst we may have a free weekend every so often, you got FA Cups, I think League Cup, I think it's already sorted now, but we've still got, I think, a Chelsea fixture to fit in somewhere in the calendar as well, with them being off at the Club World Cup now. So I think there is that opportunity that a midweek game that Pepe could start that, especially if he shows the quality that I think he's got in him as well. Now, I can say that and also say, do I think he should be at the club next season, and say no. But that's because I've got the privilege of being an Arsenal fan and being able to jump off which side of the fence I want to at any opportune moment. But yeah, Carl, back to you as well.
I mean, I kind of agree with you. I think if you saw just before the break, Saka was tired. Like, he was literally running to the ground. And I think there's an opportunity not to do that again. Surely, I hope that Arteta's learned by his mistake. And, sometimes you are going to have to maybe not start Saka, start Pepe, give him a chance to see what he can do. Like you said, I think, because looking at the table, I think something like Burnley's got like 4 games in hand, I think, or something like that. So there's going to be a lot of times where, like you said, I think teams will be playing maybe 2 or 3 games a week. You're going to see like a Sunday, Tuesday, Saturday, or something along them lines, because to the best of my knowledge, those games still haven't been put back into the fixture list to say when they're going to be played. So that's going to be difficult and interesting, to say the least. I'm going to wrap up quickly because I just want to get the questions done. But Simon, I'm not going to ask you for names because I don't think anyone knows any names at the moment. But the summer, like you said, it's going to be a very interesting time. Do you think Arsenal get their business done early?
I mean, they'll want to do it early. I think it will help this summer that there's obviously no major tournament and the league season is starting earlier. So I think there'll be a greater incentive for clubs to get things done earlier. I know with certainly with Ramsdale, he was one Arsenal were looking at before the Euros, and then basically said to him, look, don't worry, while the tournament's going on, leave it, we'll sort it out afterwards. So they won't have things like that going on. But it's going to be difficult, I think, as much as they want to do things early, when you're going for big marquee players, which I think they will be. They might come up with some challenges, but the 2 areas for me that I think, I think they need to make 3, maybe 4 signings, depending on who's going. I think you definitely need 2 strikers, a midfielder, and if you can find someone who's willing to take Cedric Suarez, you could do with another right back. So, I mean, most of the business last summer was done, other than Tomiyasu, was done fairly swiftly as could be. So, just going to have to be a wait and see. But let's hope if it runs late, it's a better deadline day than this January, which won't be hard. But
just quickly to all of you as well, do you think the World Cup will have a bearing on the players? I mean, obviously, if you're going to the World Cup, you're going to want to, or if you're on the cusp of making your international squad for the World Cup, you're going to want to pick a team where you're going to play every single game, because, as you said, the World Cup's going to approach very, very quickly because it starts in November, I believe. So I'll go to you first, Chris. Do you think that is a bearing on what players pick, or what clubs players pick?
Yeah, and not just in terms of the the players like that are in form, because you always get that one, that James Rodriguez type of player that has a really good World Cup and someone signs him for 40 million and he just disappears in a year. But no, even negotiating with players, not just so you're adding 2 stumbling blocks. You're putting a World Cup in, and it's notoriously difficult to get deals done for players during tournaments. But not only that, a normal World Cup, you have the World Cup. Other than the 2 teams that reach the final, or arguably the teams that reach the semi-finals, all the teams are home within a month. So you've still got that time between, say, July and September or July and August to still get your negotiations in because the teams are out. We're talking about World Cup, like you said, unprecedented World Cup in the middle of November. You haven't got a transfer window. You haven't got time before the season starts to get going again. I can't remember what the exact break is, but something like two weeks and they're back in action. So you're talking about trying to get players, A, out of the clubs they're in, B, whilst they're at a World Cup in a notoriously, how can I put this diplomatically? A country with questionable situations going on, shall we say? In other words, some agents, or I would imagine some players might have trouble negotiating in and out in a country of that regard. I don't know what their rulings are over there, but I imagine certain deals can't be done or situations can't be sorted out over there, so they might have to come back to Europe to get deals done. It's a bit of a minefield, and all the while you're trying to do that mid-season. And I mean, Christ, if we go into next season waiting for the World Cup break to then get our transfer dealings done, somebody's head has to roll, because I think I'd like to think I speak for all of us here on the pod tonight where I say, look, I said it before we started recording, I'm not disappointed about this window. I'm just, sorry, I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. I think we all kind of had a suspicion. And I think Jeff was in the channel earlier on. Me and him had a chat about this. I'd rather no one than Alvaro fucking Morata. So, it's kind of one of those. Like, I'm okay with us not bringing anybody in if Arteta does a madness and if we end up in the top 6, it's still a positive because we're higher than last year. The slight disappointment that I have is that I think 4th is really open. I really do. Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City are gone, I think. Well, even Chelsea even. But I think there is an opening for 4th. And I think if we'd have just put our foot out there and said, right, let's make some signings this January, we could have secured that. But fine, if they're willing to take it 3-year process, whatever, fine. But you got to get those deals done quick in the summer. And we need that transition time. And especially if we're going to go after the big number 9, you can't be Fernando Torresing it with Chelsea. You can't be buying a player, or Lukaku. I had to throw that one in. But you can't be signing a big name striker who's still struggling to tie his bootlaces in November. You need somebody in the door in early May or late May, ready for pre-season to go. So I think the World Cup only makes that business a whole lot more difficult.
Yeah, I'd agree with Chris on that one in terms of who can come in. I think the struggle would be the second choice striker that I think we need to also bring in as well. Who is that going to be? Is it going to be someone who, is a first choice for a lesser nation, or is it just somebody with no chance of making their World Cup squad from a larger nation? It's someone like, it's like Ben Yedder from French striker, probably doesn't make the French national team for the World Cup with everybody else fit and available. I think we might sneak in there, but it's that kind of player. Are you looking at someone like that to come in as second choice, or is it a youngster who, it will take the hunger level of it and knowing that they'll be playing European football, hopefully, next season. There's be plenty of games for them to get minutes if we finish where we should. But yeah, as Chris has said, it's going to be, in isolation, this window looks a disaster. But I always had that feeling in the back of my mind that you could see that we were going to be unfazed and we were going to be completely clinical in this window. What we saw from the last window as well was they weren't going by speculation or going by these should be big names. The Ramsdale signing shows it, the outrage and the emotion from the Arsenal fan base, including a lot of us here, about why are we putting that much money into Aaron Ramsdale? If we were running the club, we would have bought somebody else and we wouldn't even seen maybe the level of performance that we would have seen from Ramsdale. I think I probably wanted Wojciech Szczesny to come back at that point. And would I have Szczesny or would I have Ramsdale now? I think that's a very different question. I think that's the big kind of thing that we got to kind of step aside and just look at it holistically. That in the summer, if we then get that number 9, I don't think the number 9 getting them 6 months later changes where we finish in the table. There's very little in terms of what they need to bring to the team and how inconsistent everybody else is as well. Chris, you brought Chelsea into it and then immediately realised that you got to dismiss them because they've lost more games than Brighton this season. Because I can throw that one in as a nice little stat. There's only 2 teams that have lost more games or lost fewer games than Brighton this season. But that shows how inconsistent the top teams are right now. That United, they still brought in a new manager, but they've got a lot of things going on at that club right now. They're rather unstable. So they're not a shoo-in for 3rd or 4th. Spurs, we've got to play them. We're going to, they might think that we ran away from that game. I think there's extra fuel to the fire, and extra motivation for us in that game as well. They've got a lot harder runs than we necessarily do because of how fixtures have fallen and where we've got to play our difficult games. They've both got to play Liverpool and City. I don't think we do now for the rest of the season. So there's going to be teams dropping points left, right and centre. So I don't think it was a given that you bring in a striker. They could equally only return 5 goals for us and we finish up 8th. There's that kind of side of the coin as well. We've seen that this team has put in performances that are good enough for us to be top 4. And looking at the calendar year, from last calendar year, how well we performed, I'm pretty sure we were in the top 4 then. So this group of players is good enough for that league position. It's just a case of making sure that on our day, I don't think bringing in that marquee signing, overpaying and maybe getting that decision wrong based on player availability. It's Morata or bust. I think we'd all take bust right now, especially if that then means someone like Isaac or Dominic Calvert-Lewin, somebody like that coming in the summer. I think we'd all sit back and go, fine. You can see why, because those were the kind of players that weren't moving in the window. But I think I've rambled on long enough now to pass it to Simon.
Just to echo everything you guys say, I think the World Cup, we've already seen a bit of the impact of what the World Cup's going to have from Bernd Leno wanting to move on. Possibly this January was debating going. Definitely, moving on in the summer, obviously with a new goalkeeper going, because he wants to be in that Germany squad. And sometimes it can work negatively for you because you've got players you want to leave, but sometimes it can be a bonus if there's a player you're looking at who you're going to be playing and isn't going to be playing at his club. You can get deals done quickly. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. And I think just wrapping up the chat we've had on the window, I think you'll find with pretty much all supporters that they will take a quiet January window like this, shedding deadwood, getting your ducks in a row, if you execute in the summer. I think if the summer isn't executed to what people are now expecting, then I think there'll be certainly a not. Edu would be wise to stay off Twitter, I think. There'll be a fair few memes flying around, I would suspect.
Definitely. I definitely agree with all of you. I think the World Cup coming so fast and so quick, I think that there'll be a lot of teams or a lot of players onto the agents saying, I think I've got a chance of making the World Cup squad. I want to go to a club where no club should always guarantee any player first team football, but they'd almost want to, that slight promise of, you'll start every game, you'll definitely do that. And I think teams knowing that Arsenal need a striker, they know that Aubameyang's gone, they know that Lacazette potentially could leave, they know that Eddie Nketiah is going to leave. And even if he stays, he's not going to be Arsenal's number one striker. And there's no way in hell that's going to happen. So I think as long as Arsenal do their business, I guess, early on the quiet, I mean, we know that if Isak is our target, we know that he has a release clause. We know that he's not going to go for less than that release clause. So if he's the target, then we have to pay that money. And I guess that's an easy, as long as he agrees personal terms with us, that's an easy buy. I think obviously you are, surely Edu and Arteta and his team are looking at players thinking, okay, this is who we want. We need to go for these targets. But I still, maybe you lot disagree with me. I really do think it depends on whether we have European football next season. I mean, we didn't have a problem bringing in some players this season, but I think next season is going to be just a little bit harder, because if Arsenal don't make Europe this season, when does that happen? I mean, again, trying to get back into the Champions League, I think, has proved harder than anybody would have thought. You know, we are fighting. Inconsistency is a key, but we are fighting the likes of West Ham. We are fighting the likes of Manchester United. We are fighting the likes of, I'm going to put Chelsea in that squad, because I don't think Chelsea are a sure thing, and Spurs, unfortunately. And then if they stay up, we've also got the added pressure of competing with Newcastle for players. If they can just throw money at players, and they are gonna be able to compete with the likes of Arsenal, Man United, and Chelsea for players. Because if a player doesn't show any loyalty and is only paying for money, if Newcastle can pay this player, I don't know, $1 million a month, it's something stupid like that. I mean, Chris will tell you about Bruno. I'm sure Bruno's almost tripled his wages, like going to Newcastle. What player is going to turn that down, irrespective of the country he's leaving? If a player can triple their wages to go and play football in another country, they're going to do that.
Four times as much. He's gone 4 times as much as he's on at Lyon. He's gone at four times as much as his salary at Lyon. Plus bonuses.
Yeah, so there you go. But anyway, we've rambled on long enough. Josh, I'm going to pass it over to you to ask listener questions.
I will. I'm going to go to the ones from Twitter first, because sometimes we've got some people interact with us on Twitter when we put tweets out. Not all the time though, Carl. Right? Could be a lonely place out there for us when we're tweeting from the pod account. The first one, I will go for. Actually, Carl, I don't think you went through about Pepe. This is from Mike Hertz. Will Pepe get more minutes, or is simply a player that the club weren't able to move on in January, and he'll sit on the bench for the rest of the season?
I think he will. I think we've learned that we can't run Saka into the ground anymore. He has to get minutes. There's going to be rotation, because is Eddie good enough to play up front? No. Will Lacazette be able to last 90 minutes? Debatable. So, like I said, Chris was that sort of put Pepe on just for a bit of organised chaos, and he doesn't know what he could do. So I think he will, and I think hopefully Arteta has seen what he can do in the African Cup of Nations. He's watched those games and thought, oh, if you can do that there, why can't you do that for us? So I think he will get more minutes.
Sweet. Question for you, Simon, from Olive Queen. Anything you got on the inside scoop from Jack Wilshere? Makes sense to utilise him, but there's no word coming out. What's the situation?
I think it's pretty clear that while he's at Arsenal, his role is just going to be coaching and working with the youngsters. If you were going to sign him, the time to do it was when there was a midfield crisis, and it was put to Arteta in one of the press conferences that you've got a pretty obvious solution rating sitting right there for you, and Arteta pretty bluntly or directly just said it's pretty clear what Jack was brought here to do. So I think I personally think he might just end up maybe at the end of season becoming a full-time youth coach there. A lot of the young players you can see from Instagram absolutely love working with him. He's an academy boy. He can speak to them all about the journeys they've gone through, and the fact that we've gone all the way through January and no clubs have come in for him might just be the sign for him to start looking at the next stage of his career, which is sad. But I think he's probably found quite a nice role at Arsenal, and one that suits him and the club, I think.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of top-level managers that are now, well, there's 2 Germans I can think of off the top of my head that careers were curtailed early by injury and went on to have pretty good coaching careers in Nagelsmann and Tommy Tickles. And
the thing with Jack as well is it's a lovely thought until it happens and it goes wrong. It's a lovely idea, and I love the principle of it. And it's one of those. If you could say to me, he'll come in and he'll be fully fit, and he'll play even 10 games, or be involved in 10 games, whatever, then you go, great. But the minute you sign him and he has an injury, or, he has like that moment, I'll never forget when he went to Bournemouth and he got sent off, didn't he, early on, and all the Bournemouth fans just went, oh, what's the point? Like, he can't even control his temper at our level. We brought in this marquee player and he's let everybody down. And that's the problem. And with our fan base, as level-headed as they are, you can just imagine, can't you? It would all be like, oh, we love Jack. Jack's great. And then he does something, maybe a bit questionable, or the old Jack comes out because he's a fiery lad. He's a passionate player. Or, as I say, he gets injured, which is no fault of his own. And then everyone will turn. Oh, why have we wasted our fucking money? And it's another player we'd have on our books that we'd have to then move on, unless you sign him on a pay-as-you-play, of course. So, like Simon said, I think he's a really good influence to have around the squad. I think he's matured a lot as well over his time. He seems like a guy who's really matured and maybe has sort of got to that point in his career and thought, cool, I was running England's midfield and then I couldn't get in West Ham's team, and then I ended up at Bournemouth, and now I'm back training with a club who, I love, but really have done me a favour here. It's not like we reached out to him and said, we would like you to be part of our team behind the scenes. We reached out to him and said, if you would like somewhere to train, we're here for you. So it's almost a bit of a, sort of helping an old mate out rather than an actual professional interest. But I think he'd be great as part of our coaching staff, especially because how old is that Carlos? What's his name? The young coach we've got.
Yeah, they're in the 20s as well. I think him and Molina are both young coaches. So
yeah, how good would it be to have a proper Arsenal man? But also because I often think, like, if you, like, Roy Hodgson went to Watford. Nothing against Uncle Roy. We all love him. Of course we do. But could you imagine Uncle Roy with a couple of, 30-something coaches? It's 2 different genres of football, isn't it? Like Neil Warnock with an up-and-coming manager. It wouldn't be the same. Look at Wayne Rooney's gone into Derby. His assistant's Liam Rossini. Similar age, similar background, similar careers. Obviously not at such a level. But I think that if Arteta had the opportunity to build around sort of players that have been there and done it and have that here we go Arsenal DNA, I think he'd be mad not to have Jack as a proper coach. But yeah, bringing him back as a player, I just think the idea is lovely, but the actual sort of realism of it is just not really there, is it?
No,
it hurts me to say that.
It doesn't seem sensible on a lot of levels, especially as you mentioned. It's not like bringing Henry back because Henry didn't have the injury issues, and but yeah, Chris, whilst you were there, a question from Miko. I think you've answered the first part about a midterm report on Saliba, but the other part of it, which is going to be the interesting bit, because the window has just not necessarily slammed, just swung closed, but some thoughts on any Ligue 1 forwards that we should be looking at the summer. I think you mentioned one already, whose name escapes me, and I'm sure there was another that was linked to Palace. Was it a Ren from Ren? Reims. Rhymes.
Rams.
How do you say it?
Are we talking Ekitike, as Simon mentioned earlier on?
Maybe. Is he the one at Reims?
Rafs, yes.
Yeah.
Uncultured swine. Yes, yeah. Not Reims, Rafs. Yes, yeah. Hugo Ekitike is I was talking to Simon about him. He's a young French striker, 21, I believe, 20, maybe 22 now, but he's young. Can play both as a wide striker and as a centre forward. He's got the sort of the Anelka type of style about him, and not the Anelka that we had at his peak. I'm talking the raw Anelka that arrived from PSG. He's got that kind of wiry body frame, quick, in and out, moves across the front line really well. And he's a player who can play on the shoulder, so you can put a ball over the top, he'll run in behind. But he's also for his age, he's quite a physical player. And he holds the ball up quite well, not sort of Giroud type of style, but he's the player you can play into feet or you can play him behind. He isn't just one-dimensional. I'm really surprised that more clubs didn't have a go at him. I'm very pleased that he turned down Newcastle. He's from good stock as well. He chose to stay at Rams, as Simon alluded to earlier on. The deal was on the table. Rams were happy to take the money. He wanted to stay, and he sort of very maturely said, "I want to see out the season with Rams and keep my team," as he said, my team in Liga, and then we'll look again. And I think that's a really mature outlook. So he's one I would love, but I fear that he'll get poached by a lesser club. If he goes to Burnley, I swear to God. Anyway, other than that, the obvious names: Jonathan David at Lille is obviously doing the rounds. Big fan. It would make our Canadian chums very happy. It would make me very happy. He's come on big time this season. He struggled to find his feet a little bit last season. This season, he looks a different player, different animal. And he's filled out physically as well. I think he'd be an excellent pickup. Not so keen on the idea of Dembele from Lyon, just because I think you're basically signing Lacazette again. And I don't think that will end particularly well. He's very talented, but he is quite a heavy set sort of. He's not slow, but I wouldn't call him explosive. And I think people wouldn't be that blown away by that signing. I don't think it would really be the one. Elsewhere, there's a few names that you would get from Liga. Mauro Icardi is another one that's been sort of muted. No thanks. I don't think. And if we signed Icardi, for God's sake, Simon, don't let Mrs. Simon go to any press conference, for the love of God. But no, he's a very divisive figure, and I think he'll probably end up going back to Italy. So no thanks on him. And then beyond that, you're looking at mid-table fodder, I guess. There's some young, sort of promising centre forwards coming through. Callum Wendo is probably the only other one I would maybe have a sniff at. He's at Nantes. I believe he's on loan from PSG, but he's out of contract in the summer. He's going to move on. But I think, don't quote me on this, I might Google it, but I believe he's got a deal in principle with a Bundesliga club. I want to say it's Frankfurt. So that might be off the table, but he would have been one I'd had a look at because he's very talented. But barring that, I mean, Milik at Marseille, it wouldn't exactly ignite anybody's. It wouldn't tickle the taste buds, would it? Really? So I think personally we won't go to France this summer. I think we'll go quite heavy for Isak. The only other one that's just come to my mind that maybe you could take a look at is Gaëtan Laborde at Rennes, purely because he only moved to Rennes this season. He's done really, really well. He's come on leaps and bounds. He was at Montpellier previously and did a great job. And again, he's kind of Giroud with pace, is what I'd say. And he's good in the air. He's good technically. He's a bit uncompromising, but he gives you something different. But he has got pace and he can get in behind. And you probably get him for a good price. But again, I could see him more at Everton or that type of club than us. I think Isak ticks a lot of boxes, and he's the one I'd go for if you couldn't get David.
Do you know what's mad, Chris? Is that you haven't mentioned the French striker that's free this season. Like, why would he not come to Arsenal?
Oh, Calvin Mbappe. Yeah, he's yeah. I think Kieran might be slightly out of our wage and price range. Can you imagine Mikel Arteta trying to get Mbappe to track back? That ain't gonna work.
You just get Wenger back to go over to Sammy's table again. Dinner.
There is suggestions that he's already signed for Real Madrid, which is interesting because they play each other, don't they, next week? So that there is a lot of suggestions coming out that deal is done and that it's just a matter of time before he goes. But yeah, we aren't getting Mbappe, I'm afraid. Sorry to upset everyone, but that's not happening.
Well, the one that got away, one of many.
The dream has died.
Carl, question from Josh Robinson. Says, it's a hypothetical question. We finished top 4. Tell us why.
Because the other teams are shit.
Excellent. Good job. There was two ways that question was going to be answered. It was either going to be eloquent or just like that.
Perfect answer, because it's so
I mean,
true.
in all seriousness, the other teams. Let's be very honest. The other teams around us have to be poor for us to get there. I don't have a lot of faith in our striking options. I really don't. And goals win games. I think the players that play behind the main striker are brilliant. You got Saka, Martinelli, Smith Rowe, Odegaard, brilliant. And I know I don't want you to roll your eyes, Chris, but is Lacazette good enough to lead our line? Probably not as a striker. But the thing is,
I agree with you. It's not.
So
not right now.
What you're looking at is I want my striker to be a striker, and I feel like there are other occasions where Lacazette plays everywhere but up front. And sometimes I just want you to be like, no, you don't need to track back, you don't need to run, don't worry about that. You play up front. I mean, we laugh at this, but I think there is a truth to it where he can't last the whole 90 minutes. And maybe he needed this break. Maybe this break, going to Dubai and not playing we don't play until the 12th of February, I want to say. Is our next game against Wolves or something around?
It's the 10th of Feb.
Sorry, it's the 10th of February. So
Thursday night.
We've had a very, very long break, and I'm hoping that all the players come back rejuvenated. And I'm not expecting, like I said, to come back and be prime Ronaldo, like original Ronaldo, not this one at Man United. But and I want him to do that. But maybe we are going to have to depend on other teams around us not to be so good. And for us, when we drop City points against City teams where we should have won and we don't, because we create loads of chances, but we just don't have someone to put the ball in the back of the net. I think our defence, as long as Tomiyasu's back, which makes me a bit worried. I haven't seen Tomiyasu in any training pictures in Dubai. I don't know if anyone else has. I don't know if he's even in Dubai. I don't know if he's not fit. I have no idea. But he's a big part of the way we play, playing out from the back. And I'm just hoping that we just have the consistency to go into top four. Top four's there for the taking. Like all three of you have said, it is absolutely there for the taking. Dare I even say third place, because I still don't think Chelsea are that consistent. So, the last 18, 19 games is going to be very interesting in this league, I think, especially with other teams playing in Europe as well. That is going to take a toll on teams as well.
Yeah, I think 10 wins is all we really need, I think, to get us into top four. I don't think anyone else is putting together a run better than that, especially we've got games in hand on teams above us as well, that would put us into top four positions. So I should continue with the questions. Simon, one from Phil Macker. Are our transfer dealings truly dreadful, or are we just all a bit close to it and other clubs are just as bad? I mean, for one example, it's not exactly like your chairman's walking into the room with the same chairman and switching £7 million and getting a striker back for it. Tony Bloom.
Well, I mean, I looked at the window, and everyone loves to go, who won the window? And I don't think many clubs really had good transfer windows, other than I thought Villa's was pretty good in terms of the players they got out and who they got in. Newcastle's was okay, given the situation they were in. If you're in a relegation battle and you can sign, a Brazil international, a pretty decent right back who's playing a Champions League final, a decent Dan Burn, I think is a pretty good centre back. But those are two clubs with, vastly rich owners. One of them basically a country, and Villa with a new manager who they're backing relentlessly. Other than that, I didn't really look at anyone and go, they've had an amazing window. Liverpool got Diaz in, which is good for them. Spurs just felt like Pratchetti went into his old phone book and signed two players that he'd signed before for his old club. So, yeah, I just don't think it was a good window for anyone, really. And as we touched on before, I think Arsenal were better, as we've seen from the spate of contract terminations, to not spend rather than spend badly.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Everyone seems to be a bit smarter, which I think covers Julian's question as well. The thinking, have we got any financial issues, or are we just being smart? So,
I mean, the only one that made me wonder about financial issues and FFP or anything like that was the Chambers one, because he was going for free anyway. So I don't know whether there was something like, and they obviously didn't take up the option, whether they thought, oh, we need to try and, save a bit off the wage bill here. Chambers, we can get him out the door quickly. I don't know. I've not heard that there is a case, but I think looking at the pretty mass exodus, there's an argument to someone to say, maybe there was a bit of financial issues. We're all just going to have to inevitably wait for Swiss Ramble to do a huge Twitter thread and explain that, yes, there is a financial issue.
Fair. So, yeah, I think it was just, I thought it was more us being smart than us being stupid with money. We're going to go to next. Chris, do you watch any Portuguese football?
Sorry, I was just couldn't find the unmute button there. A little bit, not avidly, but.
Do you know any more about Darwin Núñez than I do from Brighton trying to sign him last summer?
This is the Benfica chap, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I know enough to think that he's very, very talented. My slight concern is how many players have you seen come out of the Liga NOS who have ultimately not quite done it? Do you know what I mean? There's a difference
Bruno
between
Fernandes.
Well,
I know our feeling on Bruno Fernandes. It's for us. We don't think he's made it here, but
the one I'm scarred by is Jackson Martinez, who was at Porto, wasn't he? And he was brilliant. And then he came, and it just went absolutely off a cliff. I think he ended up in China selling rugs or something. I don't know. But
Oscar Cardozo was another, wasn't he?
Cardozo
banging goals in.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit like the Eredivisie Portuguese league, in that, do you remember Jan Vennegoor of Hesselink and Van Hooijdonk, but that they Kesman, remember him? Christ,
yeah.
But yeah,
Patson Daka.
I mean, Patson Daka, to be fair, is technically very good, but yeah, I think the player has a lot of upsides. I just think it's a bit risky, because I think they're talking 60 million euros or something like that. Mm-hmm. That's a hell of a gamble on a player who's, and he's only played at Benfica, I think I'm right in saying. So it's not like he's got any European experience. And there's just too many players who've come out of Portugal, not necessarily players, strikers that have come out of Portugal that I just don't really think have done it. I mean, Wolves, Fabio Silva, prime example. Kid's got talent, but has he really done anything to wrap up the amount of money that he spent? Not really. So I personally would rather spend that 60 million on you look at Isak, he's a full international, played in a top league, proven records, even David, same. So I think it's a bit too much of a gamble, unless he's on the cheap. So not for me, thank you, Pedro.
Yeah. Cool. Right, I think we have got some tight timings this evening. We've got to make sure Simon gets his dinner, otherwise who knows what will happen. Say quickly to Terence, we're not going through Chelsea's bins anymore. It's not for us. And sorry, Fempster and Matthew and Chris, we didn't get to your questions, but Carl, back to you.
Thank you, both of you, or all three of you. Chris, we don't see Chris very often. I think we need to get Chris back on. His views are always more welcomed, and I think everyone else misses you, Chris. So forget about French football. Come back to ABW. We miss you.
I miss me. No, it's honestly nothing personal, guys. I love you all to bits, and it always makes me chuckle when people go in the chat and they're like, "Oh, he's out of retirement." I'm not retired. I'm not that old. I have turned 39 though since the last streamed or since the last podded, so I am a year older, closer to 40. But no, it's just work. I'm for those of you who don't know, I'm on a sort of a fixed term contract with my employer, who shall remain nameless. So I'm just working my balls off to try and get myself a permanent job, which hopefully I'll hear a bit more about next month. So once that's a bit more clear, I might be a little bit more available, but at the moment it's just all go. But I'm still here, and I told Danny I couldn't do January, but I said as soon as I'm back in February, I'll be on, and February the 2nd, here I am. Thank you, Danny, for that lovely message scrolling across the bottom. But lovely to be in your company, gentlemen, so thank you as always.
And Simon, the best journalist that we know, better than some other journalists who are going to remain nameless. One that I truly don't like, he works for the Daily Mirror.
John Cross.
No, I'm not saying
What?
you, but
Sorry.
Simon, it's always nice to see you, and we need to get you and Andrew back on. Andrew's dodging me because he knows that I will mess up his journey. I don't care if he's moved; I will still mess up his journey if I can.
I'm glad that Danny's put up that terrifying photo of me there, which is not the reason I've not been on the pod because I had that horrible tash. But no, thank you for having me on. Whenever I can get on, I will try and be on. Let's hope next time I speak, Arsenal are in the midst of a winning run and Lacazette is on fire.
I mean, you probably got more chance of Chris French league is a farmer league, but then that happening. But stranger things have happened. But anyway, everyone, thank you for tuning in. This has been a Bergkamp Wonderland.
Didn't even thank me. Fuck you, Carl.
I did. I thanked you first. You were the first person I thanked, Josh. But Josh, you're like Danny. You have to be here. You're like Danny.
I don't. I could be on Highbury squad. Fuck you all. I'm going.
Gosh, you are the second most important person to this podcast. Remember, you're Danny's favourite, so that's always.
He's on Kroenke money. He can be bought by anyone. He's like a mercenary at this
That's
stage.
fine. You'll see me next week. I'll be in a Bengals jersey instead. I don't care.
Oh God.
And LA Rams.
Hasn't Danny got a surprise for all something coming up, which I don't know if we can mention. We won't mention it yet, but
I don't trust Danny in surprises. It usually results in pictures in bathtubs. I'm not sure I want any part of that, to be honest.
I still have nightmares about that picture.
Thank God for that sponge.
Oh God. On that note, Josh, you're like the furniture. You're always here. You have to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are the glue that holds it together, not Danny. Danny's a shit. Anyway, this has been a Bergkamp Wonderland Arsenal podcast. Thank you for listening. And until next time, see you later.